The next location your investigators will get to in Orient Express is Lausanne. At this point, they have one piece of the Safgar simulacrum, and thus the brutal and harsh journey to collect the pieces in the scroll continues. I think Nocturne introduces a new element, the dreamlands. Where Paris' asylums scream horror, Lausanne will haunt our investigators in their dreams as they're introduced to the first piece of the scrolls, the head. So keepers, are you ready for your investigators to explore a strange taxidermy shop, deal with an obnoxious con artist, and get transported into a horrifying dream world? If you are ready, then this video will be discussing the third core adventure in Horror on Orient Express, Nocturne. In the previous module, they should have encountered Handout 6. This is the letter the investigators should find or be given at the Lorenz household. It gives info on the NPC, Edgar Wellington, as well as information on where the Safgar simulacrum is and a key item, aka the head of the scroll. All that information becomes relevant in Lausanne, so it helps to present that information up front to the players. Here are some suggestions to remind the players, and more specifically the investigators in the game, since Lausanne is the next stop after Paris. You can suggest to the players to read over Handout 6 during their downtime. You can remind them of the info they learned in the past session, either in character or out of character. During downtime, the investigators could discuss their trip to Lausanne. A person, maybe from the Strangers on the Train section, could hint at the taxidermy shop or Rue Saint Etienne if the PCs did not grab the handout. You could also just tell the players that there is an important handout/resource that they haven't gotten yet. When in doubt, I say go with clear communication. Your investigators should be battling the horrors of the Orient Express, not communication between each other out of the game. Before we proceed, let me break down for keepers what is going on. Edgar holds on to the head of the scroll in Dream Lausanne. It is in Dream Lausanne because he hopes to dupe the investigators and the Duke, the main antagonist of the scenario and some future scenarios, of their money and drugs. He is an unfortunate product of the Great War and has a heavy addiction to morphine. The combination of the dream drug, which is provided by Duke, who is part of the cult, and morphine are his relief to these terrible dreams, nightmares, and lack of sleep. Your investigators have to navigate meeting Edgar, Jean's intent on derailing the investigators, and also survive the horrors that lie in Dream Lausanne. But executing that may be difficult, since you can't predict everything that will happen. So I organized my thoughts by separating this scenario into 3 acts. 1. Edgar and William socialization / Etienne fetch quest. 2. Lausanne exploration and dinner date with con artist Maximilian Bulig. 3. Dream Lausanne in the final confrontation. Obviously, we're going to start on Act 1, Edgar and William socialization. Once the investigators arrive in Lausanne, they will likely head to the taxidermy shop. Here, the investigators will meet the Wellington family. Firstly, there is Edgar Wellington. He is a 35-year-old veteran of the Great War. As you could tell, unfortunately, the Great War has butchered a man's mental and emotional health. He recently and unfortunately has gotten addicted to morphine to ease his insomnia and deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder from World War I. This addiction to morphine, combined with his intense occult interests, has led him to meet Duke Jin, who supplies Edgar morphine and the dream drug that alleviates Edgar's sleeplessness. Whereas Edgar suffers the mental and emotional trauma of the Great War, William suffers the physical injuries. William has open-quote head wounds that left him mute and paralyzed the muscles in his eyes so that now he can only stare straight ahead, close quote. I think the whole point of William is to be creepy and unnerving. The text even suggests giving him a hat to make him more creepy despite him being not hostile to the investigators at all. The big thing about the brothers is that they serve as both an obstacle and or allies throughout the entire scenario. Edgar has the scroll, he got it during the Great War, but needs money to sate his morphine addiction, so he will 100% overcharge investigators for the service / treating the scroll. The point of Act 1 is to introduce the investigators to Edgar and his brother. The investigators could just directly talk to Edgar or they could go snooping. In the case of investigators going directly to Edgar, play it out as a normal conversation. The book suggests options for if the group contacted him beforehand or are just acting like customers. Regardless, he sniffs money from the investigators and he needs it. You can even allude to his addiction or his secret intents in a number of ways. 1. investigators see an empty morphine bottle in the trash. I highly recommend putting it in a place that would not be noticeable. A spot hidden check can work for this. And if players fail that check, they find the bottle and or trip on something or upset Edgar slightly, which may cause them to raise the price or not be willing to chat with the investigators at all. 2. The book suggests a small talk over tea. This is a good opportunity for the players to make psychology rolls to determine his mental state and or other hidden information. You could suggest to the investigators to make psychology checks, or the socially wit characters can simply know that something is off from Edgar's inflections or mannerisms. Just be sure to clue the players that something is off, because sometimes players won't realize to ask these questions, especially if they are new. Thirdly, the taxidermy shop is a prime location, and especially for the bear and upper floors, both in real life and in Dream Lausanne. Specifically, the bear in the real world has no value, but the investigators visit Dream Lausanne. That is where the real scroll is. And in fact, the taxidermist side note on page 215 is helpful, so read that first, keepers. For the bear, I recommend putting some emphasis on the taxidermy, but be subtle. You don't want to reveal all your eggs in the basket. Now, if investigators choose not to engage with Edgar, and instead they go to the more criminal route and snoop around illegally, then page 215 will be helpful because it gives specific information on each of the rooms inside of the taxidermist shop. If the investigators succeed at their stealth checks, lock-picking or social-based checks, getting in, then they can find Lausanne handout number 1, a morphine bottle and syringe on the upper floors, and a green bottle of unknown liquid, aka the dream liquid, to send the investigators to Dream Lausanne. I recommend, if they do find this stuff, to not make this a cakewalk. Sneaking into the shop should be difficult but not impossible, and should lead them to eventually learning about Dream Lausanne and entering into Act 3, since it would technically skip meeting Duke/Jean. Present how they're going to get in. They could pick the lock or break and enter through the front. That will require lock-picking dexterity or other creative options depending on player creativity. So present them with a locked taxidermy shop. Whether the predators are home, have that depend on a luck roll and or a spot hidden roll to see if they see a light emanating from upstairs. Just make it logical. When they get in, you can present these as challenges. Maybe the group needs to stealth past William Wellington, or maybe William is doing something creepy or unnerving since the character does have a disability. Though, safety tool note, I recommend checking on players prior, since giving an NPC a physical disability to creep them out or creep out non-disabled characters is pretty ableist. So be sure to check in the players or to outright remove the concept of this altogether. Act 2 is where they will meet Jean, or Duke, and are led away from the primary objective. Duke is a boorish French aristocrat who has extended his life due to him being actively a part of the Brothers of the Skin. His title in the dreaming world is the Jigsaw Prince. He is a 90-year-old man who looks 40 due to the power that his cultist studies have given him. Edgar asks Duke to offer a tour of Lausanne to the investigators and stops the conversation in its track. It feels like a contrived way to extend the scenario, since the only valuable thing is that they meet the Duke, who is the primary antagonist in future scenarios and this one. Despite that, I still say take your due diligence, keepers. If the players decide to go with Duke for a tour and the 70 Club dinner, I recommend doing these things. Firstly, give them the tour if the investigators take the offer. Do this so that when the Duke does come to bite them in the ass later, the players feel the sting of betrayal. It also gives the investigators and Duke a chance to size each other up. Smart players will size them up with a psychology roll or another roll of their choice. The book says a success gives you this. A successful psychology roll concerning him suggests only that the Duke is a man of many facets, not all of them visible. If your players are smart, witty, and clever, give them more information. For example, if they get an extreme success on a psychology roll, they should discern that the Duke has a dark aura around him, and a critical success gives them that he is clearly tied to the occult in something dark and foul. to the point that they lose a point of sanity by gaining a point of Cthulhu mythos. I always reward critical successes with something amazing or horrifying in my games. Here's an example of what I wrote up for when a player does meet Duke and rolls a critical success. You feel your hair stand up and your muscles twitch as you eye the Duke. A cough comes up as the cold air tightens around your throat. There is a darkness in him, and you feel it as the snow falls in Lausanne. And as you look at him directly, he gives you a half-hearted smile. Amused by something. He seems like he'll remember you, for better or worse. This awards players for their great success, without giving away too much info. Secondly, Duke's house can be both dangerous and fun to check out if they choose to go there. I say give forewarning because players might not know what they're in for since it has traps, magic point loss, and they can get sent into Dreamlands with no way of knowing how to get out. Thirdly, if the players don't go to the house, they will be invited to the 7:30 Club for dinner to discuss the head of the scroll with Duke, Edgar, and some other compatriots. This doesn't happen. The Duke intends to steal the scroll from Edgar at any cost, while investigators are busy being distracted at 7:30 Club. And TLDR, Edgar creates a fake scroll since he doesn't want to sell the original, and Duke never intends to buy that scroll or any scroll because he's going to kill him in cold-blooded murder. All this happens while Max, the con artist, is yapping on and trying to extort the investigators. Max's entire scene, I think, is a waste of investigators' time and just likely there for comedic effect. And to be honest, I think there is a lot going on in Act 2 that can be skipped. Investigators find the dream drug way earlier in Act 1 or somehow make it their own. I don't know how you do that, but hey, players are creative. If they have an idea to do something, let them try to do it. At least try. Speaking of which, if anyone has suggestions on Maximilian's story or making Maximilian a more formidable encounter or making it more exciting, let me know down below in the comment section because I can't think of anything myself. I'll be honest, my investigators quickly picked up on that this guy was a con artist and quickly left because they had better things to do than to sit there and hear a rich nobleman brag about all their money while acting like they're poor. At some point, the players will eventually get to Dream Lausanne. And this is where the meat and potatoes of the scenario are. The investigators will wake in Dream Lausanne exactly where they left, in the Orient Express. The compartment looks exactly the same except creepier. The biggest thing is Fenelon's quarters, as shown here. I think you could add more though. If the investigators have any close friends on Orient Express, let them explore a small portion of the cabin and let them shine. While Fennec is a powerful beast, it's not unsurprising to see other dreams, other ideas reflected in Dream Lausanne or on the Dream Train. For instance, Cavallero, who is introduced in Les Fleurs de Meule, becomes extremely important in Note for Note in Milan. So why not show her dreams manifest as an opera star? Obviously, use discretion, but if investigators have allies or enemies aboard, maybe take time to show them how their dreams come into fruition. Just don't overdo it or your investigators may never leave. Speaking of it, let's talk about the Dreamland. I skipped over this on purpose, but the technical next scenario in the book is the optional Dreamland Express. This is a scenario where you can easily add it in at any point during the HOT campaign, but best before the massive encounter with Fenelon. The reason is because it gives investigators access to their dreaming and dream lore skill. Those skills in that adventure proves helpful to investigators in the Dreamland Express, but the book states something differently right as they take the dream drug. Neither the dream lore nor dreaming skill are of any use in Dream Lausanne, which is unconnected to Dreamlands. So I'll preface my statement with this. I don't give a freak what the book says. Let them use their newfound skills to respond to situations in Dream Lausanne. I assume the writers thought that they didn't want players to derail the Lausanne scenario, or maybe the skill seemed too OP for the scenario, or it didn't add the sense of horror that they liked. I don't know the exact reason. What I do know is that the dream lore and dream skill allow for more player creativity for their future encounters in Lausanne and elsewhere. Let them have that edge since they will need it. At some point, after they travel outside of the train and into the wasteland and then into the medieval version of Lausanne, they will be in the Dream Taxidermy Shop. The Dream Taxidermy Shop, or DTS as I'll refer to it, holds the real scroll. I recommend giving the players a chance to find it. I know what you're thinking. I prepared all the future stuff such as the trials by Edgar Wellington and the confrontation of the Duke, but I say give them the chance. Make it difficult, make it hard, but don't not give them the chance. I say don't let them use spot hidden firstly, since this bear is easily noticeable just from the vile smell. What they do and how they investigate the bear or the parts of the dream shop is up to GM caveat. Maybe one of them cuts it open, or maybe they smash the thing to pieces if they get curious. Simply let them leave or prod them. Just let them choose how they want to interact with the world. I know, as a game master or keeper, you would want your players to investigate the street and city of Lausanne and even challenge a duke, but don't rail the players if they don't want to. A simple, "Are you sure you want to do this?" is always better than not saying anything at all or actively railroading players, especially when this game is already on rails, literally. Now, assuming they travel the streets of Dream Lausanne, they will encounter foreshadow events to come in the campaign. These are entirely optional and creepy bits that you can add. I say roll a 1d7 and give them 1 or 2 events. Or you can ask them if they want to experience some strange events that may prove helpful. Whatever decision you arrive at, make sure to ask them what they want. Because really, you want to get to the trial of Edgar Wellington. After they've explored Dream Lausanne, they will eventually arrive at the trial of Edgar Wellington. They will see a human stream following the tolling bell in the distance. In the center of the town is a large platform with 3 figures: a bronze statue, a hooded robed figure, and Edgar Wellington tied up on trial for grievous crimes of withholding what is due to us, which renders him our enemy, as stated by Duke, aka the Jigsaw Prince. Duke hopes to put Edgar on trial and force his hand over the scroll. Your investigator's job should be to defend Edgar's innocence despite him being doomed in the real world, unless you change that. I suggest to let this run similar to combat. Let the investigators come up with a defense on behalf of Edgar using their creativity. Let each investigator speak or add to the argument for each of the acts inside the trial. For instance, the first charge is about him resisting arrest, but this is an insincere charge. Edgar was seized from his dream home in the middle of the night. Obviously, the people of Dream Lausanne cannot be rational enough. They will side the Jigsaw Prince no matter what. But the judge, aka the statue, is impartial and will side or lose favor on the argument. The investigators have to come up with a response, and that response can be judged on a scale of 1 to 4. Let them use their reasoning and emotional skills to respond and not leave it down to a singular role. Let them use their past experiences to bump the argument. Let them lean into their professions or specific career skills while arguing on behalf of Edgar. You want to be fair, not cruel, but not kind either. Let the investigators fall on the scale of points for their conviction, wit, charm, and cleverness, despite the madness of the situation. And if they fail, they will likely fail to find the scroll and lose sanity points as they realize Edgar is doomed not only in life, but in death. If they succeed, they will have to make themselves scarce and get to running away, cause Duke has an angry mob descend upon them. For the escape, I recommend using the 7th edition chase rules with relevant horrors that might impede them. For instance, I referenced one of the events, specifically the one that caused a massive fissure, that worked as an obstacle. Or you can remove the chase altogether and leave it down to a few rolls. I personally say that the chase rules are really awesome for specifically this scenario, so use them. I'll have a COC 7th E chase generator and tracker in the description box for you to reference. Assuming they escape, the investigators will get back to the shop. With their newfound knowledge, assuming they saved Edgar, they'll find the scroll and bum rush back into the train. As they do, they will likely realize that Edgar is not coming back from the trip to Dreamland since he was killed by Duke when the Duke came into the house and took his stuff and brutalized his brother. Maybe Edgar did survive the encounter with Duke. Maybe he didn't. I say reward investigators if they are particularly amazing or kind to Edgar and or heroic. Reward them 1d3 sanity rather than them losing it. If they fail to save him and or acting cruelly to Edgar, then they lose 1d3 sanity as they realize he's doomed not only in real life, but in the dreamland. When they escape, they will wake up in the train or where they last fell asleep. At this point, they have likely obtained the head of the scroll alongside handout 3, which is sample passage from the scroll. The handout is super detailed and is a huge block of text. I recommend either shortening it or asking players to take turns reading it. Or maybe you want them to read all of it. From there, investigators have a powerful scroll and you should proceed to the conclusion section, aka the investigative development phase before they journey into Milan. But let's roll back. The book mentions an optional encounter with the Duke. This happens only if the investigators did not dupe the prince with the fake scroll, but I think you can still leave off with one final meeting with Duke too, if you are feeling dangerous. In the section Paris Lunch, the Duke should present himself as a dangerous but cordial enemy. I imagine Duke as the affably evil trope. He will invite himself to eat with the investigators on the Orient Express, and essentially demand for the scroll or destroy them. As he says, "Gentlemen, if you will excuse my hurried bluntness, I come to the point. I want the scroll. You will give it to me or I will destroy you. Please answer promptly. I have little time for games." The book suggests a number of options. They could give the fake scroll, assuming they did not open it or destroy it. They could attack him or fight him, but that is extremely dangerous on the train of all things. Duke is immune to non-magical weapons and is very powerful, especially when the investigators have no weapons, or magical weapons that is. The Duke could also use his social capital to have the investigators arrested if William and Edgar are dead. He could seek the police on them, and if they stall, that would be a loss of time and likely sanity depending on if they're sent to prison or worse, a sanatorium. The investigators could also just give him the real scroll if they genuinely feel endangered and don't want any confrontation. Just let the investigators decide the best course of action, and use Duke's cruel spells and affably evil personality to force the investigators' hands as necessary. But before I go to my conclusion, let's recap what my investigators got up to and any scenarios that you might want to be on lookout for. First off, unlike most of the other ones I've read, my investigators actually obtained the dream drug, which is really cool. They found a full bottle in Edgar's room while snooping. Patrick faked that he was going to the bathroom and found the morphine, syringe, and dream drug combo in Edgar's room. The team reconvened and declined the tour from the Duke. Their goal was to identify what this strange drug was. None of them had a science background and did not trust Edgar at all with his morphine addiction. They asked if there was anyone at the local university who might specialize in drug-related sciences. I decided to use the stranger on the train and use Dr. Vincenzo Gaspari as the character they could interact with. He's a doctor by trade, and I added that he had a keen interest in pharmaceutical research. I stated he was stopping in Lausanne to do some paperwork while he was on the Orient Express. He was happy to help them when they rolled well in a social check, that is. In this situation, I asked the players how they wanted to proceed, and I acted accordingly by looking to the stranger on the train and went on. Another example was when they were in Dream Lausanne. One of them wanted to look through the bear, but were afraid of the molding, festering mass. So I asked them to roll a luck check, and they found these thick industrial gloves. Thanks to a successful luck check, they not only found the real scroll, but they put the fake decoy scroll in its place. It was ingenious thinking on the players, and helped them score a massive victory against the darkness of the Dream Lausanne. Also, on an unrelated note, the investigators during the trial phase made fun of me because in the second section of the trial, Duke was spouting some biological essentialist racist nonsense. And I didn't read through it fully because it was just a lot of text. So when I was reading off of it, I didn't realize until it was too late. Yeah. But it's okay. No one's gonna quote me on that anyway. Finally, as an added reward of ingenious thinking, I said that Edgar had an old tome for them. I gave it to them since they attempted to save Edgar, and despite him dying, he left his parting wishes and hopes in the investigators. I gave them the Nameless Cults of the Fleshy Desires, aka it's the base book in 7th edition called Nameless Cults. I said it was a relic he got during the Great War, and allowed them 2 spells of my choosing. The investigator Faye decided to take on these spells and lose some sanity, but gain some mythos as a reward. I think the Lausanne scenario is where things get really exciting. There are an array of encounters, from the social encounters of Duke, Maximilian, and Edgar, to the horrifying encounters with the trial. There is many things going on. On top of the foreshadowing moments, the dream train where they see Fenelek's coffin / cabinet, and just the loads of NPCs available and the trial make for a wacky time. I say the biggest advice is to let the investigators take the lead. While they should focus on the overarching task, how they go about it is up to them. The players know that they should be looking for the scroll of the head. Let them doom themselves and succeed where the dice roll. Next, we'll be taking the investigation to Milan. There, our investigators will be faced with their biggest threat, opera, and the horrors of the cultists that seek power. But until next time, you can check the resources down below in the description box for all the tools I used in the game, as well as the itch.io attachment as well. Finally, special shout out to my Patreon supporters, Harrison Parker and Paul Volpe, for your continued support. You help keep the channel running, and you too can support me by checking my Patreon over here and my coffee over here. And as always, I'm your average everyday queer keeper of arcane lore, bloody disposition. Hope you all have an awesome day. Ciao!